Welcome to the Bonhoeffer Show with Bill Hull. The show about stuff most people try to avoid, but can't because it controls their lives. Religion, culture, and politics. Why does Bill Hull host this show? Because he and Bonhoeffer hoisted a few brews together in Berlin. Nope. That never happened. Is it that Bonhoeffer's book, The Cost of Discipleship, both challenged and changed Bill as a young man? Well, yes, that is part of it. But it's primarily because Bonhoeffer called us to a costly discipleship, and there has never been a time when such courage has been more absent or desperately needed than now. Bonhoeffer famously said, "Christianity without discipleship is always Christianity without Christ." The Bonhoeffer Project is committed to turning leaders into disciple makers, because if leaders fail to create disciple-making movements, then we have failed. So, ladies and gentlemen, here he is. He's still tall and good-looking, and yes, he is wearing German cologne. He's acquired a few more underlying conditions, but direct from his underground bunker in Long Beach, California, the man who once told Don Henley, "You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave," Bill Hull.
Welcome again to the Bonhoeffer Project, or the Bonhoeffer Show even. I have to remember where I am. Today, I have with me, of course, two of my favorite people, Cindy Perkins, who are executive director, and then also we have with us Dan Lights, pastor of the Calvary Chapel in Oceanside, California. You'll be hearing from them in just a moment, but first, unfortunately, you have to listen to me for a while. The church's secular affair, that's what we want to talk about today. Leslie Newbigin, who went out to India in 1937 as a missionary and stayed basically almost 40 years. He was a brilliant man, and he returned to England, and when he retired, and he wrote several really important books, which I highly recommend. Just look him up on Amazon. He said this, "It is in the context of secular affairs that the mighty power released into the world through the work of Christ is to be manifested." What he's really saying is if we, the church, are not going to penetrate the world and its institutions and its life, then there's something wrong with our delivery system. So we're going to talk about that. And when two people love each other, it matters not if they are codependent drug addicts, a same-sex couple, or between the pastor of the First Baptist Church and his wife. It's all God's love, because God is love. God is the source of love. And human love is a reflection of his love. The Prime Minister of the Netherlands from 1901 to 1905, I remember we used to have coffee together. Abraham Cooper said it well, quote, "There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, 'Mine.'" God is love. He created love, and when flawed humans experience it, it comes from him. It doesn't mean that everybody who experiences love are Christian, far from it, or that they are living in a way that pleases God. It does mean, however, that the common grace of God and the specific graces of God run together in everyday life like the syrup runs over and saturates your pancakes. Just let that sit there for a while. You know, I haven't had pancakes in a while. I need to go to the International House of Pancakes probably tomorrow, because, you know, that's where, remember President Bill Clinton, they said that was where he got his foreign policy experience, was the International House of Pancakes. So that's an old joke from the early 90s. Ha ha, huh? All right. Join this idea with Newbegin's statement that opened this piece, and you get that the church's task is to deliver its product, which is love, to the people of the world through secular sectors of society. And if it doesn't get to those secular societies or sectors, then that means there's something wrong with, like I said, our delivery system, or there's something wrong with our factory, which is the practicality of love is missing, where we've where love is just a sentiment, meaning that, like the Romantic age overreacted to the age of reason, the power and practicality of love has been lost. So we have to think of it this way. It says God is love. That's a meaningless statement, frankly, unless there's some reason to believe that he's loving. For example, there would be no reason to, when somebody says to another, I love you, if over time there are not actions taken to demonstrate that love, then that claim is hollow. So God so loved the world, John 3:16, that he, now he's going to say he's going to do something now. He did more than feel it, think it, ponder it, sing about it, or write a poem about it. He gave his only son. So he gave something that was precious to him. He gave it. He sacrificed it. And so this idea may not appeal to the secular mind. I mean, I could think of secular-minded people go, well, so what? The idea that God had a son, whatever that means, that he gave him, I don't know why he would do that or what it has to do with me. I mean, I think I've heard a lot of people say that. One could oppose such an idea with the retort, it's not that impressive that an eternal, all-powerful God who's, okay, he died, but he didn't really die. In fact, they knew ahead of time that he would die, even though he would rise again and he would go into heaven, he'd live forever and he'd come back and everything would be wonderful and we'd live forever with him and so on. That's not as impressive as maybe an earthly father giving up his earthly son who dies and doesn't come back. And of course, I'm trying to put myself in the mind of the cynic, the mind of the person who would push back on this whole idea. And the world is pushing back on it and does push back on the idea of redemption, of sacrifice. It would be much more impressive for a human father, as I said. And this alternative scenario was played out in the story of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac. Now, a lot of people criticize this story and say, what a barbaric God that he would do this with his son. Do this with his servant, Abraham, with his son, Isaac, and that poor little boy. Well, first of all, Isaac was not poor little boy. He was probably about 25 or 30 years old. And so he went willingly, understanding the situation. So it's hard for us to get into this level of trust that Abraham was into by this point. Abraham had already left the country, the Ur of the Chaldees. He left there with his wife and his belongings. They went to a place they had never heard, they knew about it a little bit. They didn't know much about it. It was all a step of faith. And Abraham is extolled and made a hero out of in Scripture, even though he had many faults. And then his son became, remember, Isaac means laughter. And the story of Abraham and Sarai, and she laughed at Abraham when he told her that God had said she's going to have a baby. She was old and he was already himself around 80 or 90 years old. And it was sort of like she had a milk of magnesia in one hand and her false teeth in the other. And he says, hey, honey, we're going to have a baby. It was that kind of crazy situation. And the story that skeptics have excoriated for centuries, it trashes their humanly resourced sensibilities because they can't see this level of trust that Abraham might have had. But it would take conversion. And this is really kind of the bottom line about skepticism. It takes conversion and the illumination of the Holy Spirit and a new capacity to appreciate the mystery of God. And then you can start seeing the point here. And so the point is that love is action. And sentiment without action is empty. And if we Christians, we need to get our minds around this, that to love the world as God loved the world is to love the world practically and in concrete actions so that they receive it. It's not just the intention of our heart, it's how they receive that love. How do we deliver our product to secular society? Do we begin by making peace if we don't see the problem with this, with what's going on with the decline in the influence of the evangelical church, and the church in particular in the last 10 years? It's gone from 50% of the American public who identify as Christian to 25%. So we are definitely in a down period overall in the church. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to bring in our my guest host with me, and we're going to talk about this subject.
We turn leaders into disciple makers. That's the mission of the Bonhoeffer Project. But before we can turn you into a disciple-making leader, we need you to be in a cohort. A cohort is a 1-year, 10-meeting, book reading, praying, wrestling, writing, planning challenge that has the potential to change you and thus redirect your life. Interested? Here's the process. Go to our website, thebonhoefferproject.com, and complete the application form. We will contact you. We will then help you select the type of cohort that's best for you. In person, online, or online school, which is asynchronous, so it's not affected by time zones and anyone in the world can access it. Oh, and training is now also available in Spanish. In the meantime, subscribe to the show, read one of Bill's books, and send us a question you want Bill or some member of the Bonhoeffer team to answer. And now, back to the show.
We're back, and what we want to talk about now is there's a line of thought among Christians right now that we should back up and make peace with the other side. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, politically, there are two sides. We know that. There's a deep cleavage in our country. I believe that cleavage is not so much political as it is moral, in that there's different moral worldviews, and that's part of it. So there's the other side as far as worldview is concerned. Everyone acknowledges there is another side, and we have an enemy. The tricky part is the proper identification of the enemy. And I think there's wide agreement that almost everyone in America, if you just talk to the average person on the street, is anti-Satan, anti-Lucifer, anti-evil. But think about it this way. If we, as Newbegin says, we are to deliver the work of Christ, his love, and subsequently transform human beings to the world through secular affairs, institutions, and structures, how might the enemy come to us? Who's trying to shut up the church right now? Who is conducting the New Salem witch trials? Who is trying to shut up the church right now? Who's doing this? Well, I think that it's a combination of people. I think the Christian left doesn't like the Christian right. I think that conservative Christians are profiled and talked about by the religious left as being the problem with the church. And they may have a point now and then. And they can accuse us of things, but it doesn't make it true. Now, I can only speak for myself, but I do not in any way want to cancel, shut up, punish, or curtail the lefts. I don't want to burn their books. I don't want to make them not be able to have their say. I want to fight for them to have their say. I want everybody to be able to speak up and to be free to express their opinion in our country. And but I don't want, if unity means I have to join them, I have to agree with them, that I'm not allowed to speak, I'm not allowed to have dialogue, and then if my books are canceled, for example, by Amazon, which could happen, it's starting to happen with several books, and who knows? But if I have to agree that I have 6 fingers on my left hand because the state says I do, or because those who are powerful say I do, then I'm not in. I'm not in at all. And so I think that every culture goes through these periods of temporary insanity. I think that the United States is in a period of temporary insanity. I think that it's sort of like, if you wanted to destroy a nation, how would you do it? And that seems to be the way things are going right now. All right. So what I'd like to talk about and have my guest host come in and talk about is what do you think is really the nexus of our war that we're in? And you can disagree with me, take a totally different approach, and also, what war do you think you're in, and where are you investing your time right now in that battle? So let's just start there, and I'm going to start with Dan Lights. Dan?
Sorry, I'm here. The battle that we are in, that I have seen, again, obviously we know biblically it's a spiritual battle. But how it is manifested in our culture is through absolute truth. The idea that there is truth, the idea that truth is knowable, the idea that truth can't simply be something that you want it to be. You can't will truth into existence or being. That is what is gripping America in many ways. It's gripping many parts of the world. And it is sadly gripping the church, where you can redefine scriptures. You can, if you look at it this way, or if you just take, well, Jesus didn't actually say that. I know Paul did, but Jesus didn't. So therefore, then it's not true. When you start slicing and dicing biblical truth to make it fit your predetermined notions or your feelings or your hurts and dislikes, to reevaluate or evolve truth so that it can then fit what you want it to fit, you have sadly strayed away from biblical orthodoxy and strayed into the enemy's camp. So you're now actually being used as a tool of the enemy. And isn't that what the enemy tried to do? It's deception. And the key with deception is you don't know you're deceived until you're outside of the deception. When you're being deceived, you think it's true. And that's what we need to overcome.
Okay, so how much are you experiencing, like in your church, Dan?
Sure.
What the wokeness? You've heard about the wokeness church, the wokeness.
For sure.
They have their own theology. What's your thinking about that?
Well, I think it's sad. I think, again, when the whole, I know for a fact, when the whole George Floyd thing took place, there were several in my congregation that kind of sent emails and, hey, are we going to respond to this? And I told every single one of them, my first response, for the most part, my first response is never biblical. I have to pray. I have to seek the Lord, because I know what my flesh likes to do. It likes to just come out fighting. So I had to pray. And several people left our church because I didn't come out and make a statement or say something. But I don't think we have to make a statement on everything that comes out. I don't think we have to apologize for everything that's said in the culture. I don't think we have to come out with some sort of woke ideology or claim that we are in the know in order to have a platform to speak God's word. I just need to know that God's anointed me for it, and I'll stand on that. But our church generally understands that we are not moved by the various winds of wokeness, cancel culture, Americana, politics. Our church runs counter to that.
Okay, good. What about you, Cindy?
Well, I think like Dan says, our number one thing is that we must remember that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against rulers and principalities in the air. And so it's a spiritual battle that we must fight spiritually. I believe that this is a time of a wake up. We're not being woke, but we need to wake up as the church and get on our knees, right? That's we need to turn that, because it steps into that place of us understanding, yes, we understand biblical truth, but other people think they understand it equally as strongly as we think we understand it. And so if we come at each other and we start doing this, then our nation doesn't stand a chance, because if the church can't be unified in the place that we move forward as moving forward the cause of the kingdom, if we can't be unified in that, then our political underpinnings don't stand a chance of being unified. And so I think for me, it rolls back to, again, relationship, right? So when I look at how Jesus dealt with people who opposed him, who opposed his truth, I look at the fact that Jesus just asked a lot of questions, and he let them make their own decisions. And some people still decided against the truth of him and scripture and what he came to do. But other people decided for him because he gave them the opportunity to think. So if I'm trying to press my will and my beliefs on you, and you're trying to press your will and your beliefs on me, and both of us are dug in, then we're not going to do any good. We're just beating each other up. But if we, as the believers who believe that we understand the truth of Scripture, can step in and love people enough to allow them to think for themselves and ask the questions, we have to get smart. We're not always smart in our churches. We've taught a lot of things, but we've not taught how to rightly engage in these conversations. And so I think we need to teach our folks how to engage in these conversations in love and not beat people up and be just like the folks that we believe are wrong, maybe, you know? And I think that's a place, like for me, I spend a lot of time engaging with pastors through the Bonhoeffer Project and church leaders. And we talk about this. I talk about this with the ladies that I minister to through the Bonhoeffer Project a lot. I also, we have these conversations when I'm in class. These are the conversations that the young 20-somethings, late teens, early 20-somethings want to have, because they want to know how, at a Christian college, how do I reconcile this with what I see on television? And that comes back to earning the right to speak through relationship.
Amen.
Cindy, you work with a lot of college students who are African American, and I was wondering, how are they responding to, as let's say, as Christian young people, how are they responding to the cancel culture, the political correctness, the cancellation of books and films and people and so on? What's their gut reaction to all that?
Well, their gut is they think it's wrong because it doesn't make sense to them, because then they know that eventually they'll be canceled, right? So we have these conversations. One of the things that we figured out is if we can keep them off Facebook, where the conversations go unchecked and go into a negative place, they have an easier time with that. But we have these conversations about, we've had conversations about race. We've had conversations. I asked them, I said, guys, do you think, and they're mostly young African-American athletes, love these guys. They're amazing young men. And so I asked them point blank, we've developed a relationship that I can say, do you think I need to apologize for being white? And they're like, well, no, why would you do that? And I said, well, culture tells me I should. Culture tells me it's wrong for me to be white, but that doesn't bring into play the fact that God chose to make me white and to make you black. And so where do we deal with that? Where do we land that? And so we're having some very intense and raw conversations about these kinds of issues, but they don't believe in the cancel culture because they understand that sooner or later they're smarter than a lot of older people that I know, because they understand that sooner or later, if they are behind the cancel culture, the tides will turn and they will be canceled, and they don't want to be canceled, right?
Amen.
They want to be able to think and have an opinion.
Yeah, it's like us older folks. I've lived pretty much all of my life until recently, until the last year or two, in what I would consider a free society. And but now that's changed for the first time in my life. And so, yeah, I mean, I could see how they're going to come and get me, but I'm not as out there as I once was. I'm not running a large church. I'm not in the line of fire as much as a lot of people like you both of you are in. And so, I can sort of hide under the radar and so on. But a lot of people just can't, because they have to go to work every day and they have to deal with all of this and what their company is deciding and what their company decides to do with HR issues, and they have to live with this kind of thing. Now, what I wanted to do was say that where do we draw this line? I mean, when these things intersect, for example, let's say that recently a book called When Harry Became Sally. I have not read this book. I'm familiar with the book, but I've not read it. A takeoff of the movie with Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan back in the 1990s, I think it was. But the thing is that this book was canceled by Amazon simply because they thought it taught hateful things and about gender, about homosexuality, but I think it's mainly about transgender. Now, when this comes up in the church with people in their lives, and when they start canceling Christian books, for example, this was particular. I think this might have been a Christian book. I'm not for sure about it, but what do we say? Dan, what do you think?
Well, again, it really comes down to what you're looking at this culture to do for you. I don't define my walk with Christ based upon this culture, right? We're ambassadors of Christ in the culture. I like to say it, we have our boat in the water, but we don't want any water in the boat. So we're in the world, but we're not of it. And so we need to kind of be that island, that oasis, that bit of respite. When Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, he flipped the script. What people thought was religion, what people thought was virtue, he took it to an extreme level that just threw people on their ear and going, wait, what are you talking about? If it says to love our enemies. I think part of this understanding is how to define who our enemy is. Is somebody just foolish? Are they deceived, or are they actually an enemy? And making sure that we're discerning between those, because again, we don't want to, we want to love people into the kingdom, not at the expense of truth. But the world is hungry, and something to this culture. Right now, we're dealing with a lot of this because it's the loud people, right? The normal, this is why, as we talked about in our last program, this is why the Golden Globes are so down right now. Why? It doesn't resonate with normal people. A lot of this cancel culture doesn't resonate with the normal people. This is an elitism thing. And what does the enemy want to do? He wants to create war and disunity and dissatisfaction. And like you were talking about, the cleavage between the two. Because if there's war, if there's unrest, if there's distrust, he's got us right where he wants us, fearful, instead of fighting for unity.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, fear changes your brain chemistry. So you can't even think straight when you're living in fear, right? You can't think because of the chemistry that it changes. And so As the church for the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, we've slowly grown to look like the culture, right? You say we don't let the culture determine who we are. I don't let the culture determine how I follow Jesus. But many churches do let the culture determine who they are. I won't go into all the ways that we see that, right? But unless we begin to look different from the culture, we don't stand a chance of making a difference in the culture. And then we do stand a chance of seeing the wrong things as our enemies, right? So we've got to begin to look different and let the world see us look different, knowing that at the moment that we begin to really make that shift and look and act different than the culture, we're going to be canceled or worse, right? But we've got to be willing to do that. Our brothers and sisters across the world have been walking that for the last 50 years in various places. I think about some places in India and in Myanmar and some of those countries where it's illegal to do the things that we do. And I don't know, I know for me, it's like, why do we think we're so much more special as Americans that we aren't going to experience some difficulties in walking our faith? So we've got to just begin to look different and be ready for cancel culture and figure out ways around it, right? They don't own the world. Jesus owns the world, right?
That's right.
God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He lets us use them. So he's let them use some stuff. They cancel us from that. Then let's figure out a way to get around that and keep talking about Jesus.
Yeah. And in the church too, Bill, I'll say this. When people come to the church, they don't want more of the world. They're coming because they want something different. And so the church has to set itself apart. It cannot continue to look like this culture, because if it does, we've lost it, because we're trying to emulate the very thing that Jesus said, I came to die for, because you missed it, guys. You're not of this world. I'm not of this world, just like you know, so we can't look like the world in the church.
You know what Eugene Peterson said one time? He wrote a book, and one of the parts of the book was about 3 things he wanted to be, and one of them was irrelevant and unnecessary. And what he meant was irrelevant to the culture in the sense of all the things that people think are really important and relevant, like fame and power and such, and unnecessary in all the ways that the world thinks that people should be necessary. Right. And so, you know, your goal of being irrelevant and unnecessary. But what he was talking about, of course, is what you're talking about, is when in the first century, when we read the New Testament, the book of Acts, what's going on there is the religious life of Israel, of former theocracy, actually a theocracy in that's being dominated by a sort of a quasi-democracy called Rome, the Roman Empire, the Greco-Roman Empire. And so the power grid of Israel was essentially still religious. And so when when Peter and John, you know, the apostles, when they got in trouble, when Jesus was in trouble, they got in trouble with the Jews and the Jewish life, the Jewish theocracy and its ways and means and its courts and its leaders. And in our country, it's not that way. In our country, in the separation of church and state, it's more like us relating to Rome. So and then when Rome starts to get into your life, that's when you feel the heat. And I think the church is starting to feel the heat. And I think you're both right about the solution. Okay, so we're going to take a second break, and we're going to hear from Steve Simmons talking about some of the things you can do. And then we'll come back and talk about our favorite place or means to be alone with God and your thoughts. We'll talk about that. And then I want to just mention that Cindy lives in Florida, which is now pretty open. Texas is wide open. And California, well, where Dan and I live, is sort of open, sort of.
Sorry.
Anyway, let's take a break and we'll be right back.
If you want to expand the disciple-making movement, then share the show with your friends and colleagues. Hey, it's easy to subscribe. Simply go to iTunes or to our website, thebonhoefferproject.com, then click on The Bonhoeffer Show. Once you do, we will keep you updated with the Bonhoeffer Project's events, new materials and books, as well as the larger disciple-making movement current news. You can also access previous programs. And be sure to read Bill's weekly column, which is posted on the website. Remember, ask questions. Bill's answers are guaranteed to give you herd immunity, increase your IQ, and cause you to experience waves of euphoria. Well, not really, but his answers are really good. And now, let's get back to the Bonhoeffer Show.
Okay, we're back. And so, Cindy, when you want to be alone with God and your thoughts, where do you go and what do you like to do?
I like to go to the beach. That is my place. I take a cooler and a chair and an umbrella. And sometimes I take a music box, but sometimes I just want to hear the sound of the ocean and the rhythm of that space, because the rhythm is calming and soothing. And I take good, healthy snacks that are hydrating. And I take a Bible and a journal and a pen, and I just sit and I spend time with God, and I listen to the seagulls and shoo them away when they think they might need to be in my 3-foot space. And but I just the beach is my happy place. It's the place where I just hear the rhythm and I think about the washing of the water and how it cleanses daily, right? Every time it washes up, it cleanses, it pushes back out. And so that's the place. When I can't get to the beach, I am creating an oasis in my backyard, planting new flowers this spring that will draw butterflies and bees and hummingbirds. And so I can sit on my back porch in my screen so that the bugs don't eat me alive, and watch God do that, because behind me there is a power company easement, so I don't have backyard neighbors. So I just have birds, and so that's a peaceful place when I can't get to the beach, but that's where I go and play.
And you have a lanai room, right? Because everybody in Florida has one of those, yeah.
Yes, because if we don't, the mosquitoes will carry you off in the summertime.
Now, do you have, can you hear the hum of the power lines when you're out back?
Only when it's been raining or extra dewy. It's extra dewy, they hum, and I'm like, that's interesting to me. But that's the only time I hear them hum. Most of the time I don't hear them hum, and they left only behind my house, which I find kind of interesting. They left this stand of trees, palms and these grandfather oaks and all of that. So they house all kinds of birds. I hear all different birds singing until the crows come, and then I have to shoo them off. But it's just a peaceful place most of the time, because I can't hear my neighbors. So
nice. What about you, Dan?
Well, I wish I was super spiritual like Cindy. I actually, when I go to the beach, I think about the enemy a lot, the enemy of our souls, because I don't like sand. And what I find is, over the weeks and months after I've been at the beach, I still find pockets of sand. It's like sin. There's still like sand in my toenails. There's sand in my belly button. I'm going, what in the world? If the beach were paved, I'd be all about it. Or if there was fake grass, I'd be all about that. No, truthfully, my place to go is with 4 kids, anywhere it's quiet. I'm just in that season right now where my oldest is 13 and my youngest is 6. And so anytime I get some quiet time, so really it's for me just waking up a little extra early and just sitting on my couch. And my wife and I bought her an espresso machine. I bought her an espresso machine. We both get to use it though. And just sit there with my Bible. And if it's quiet for a good hour before everyone wakes up, it's such a sweet time to just open the shades, watch the sunrise, again, I think there is something though with Cindy as well, just being in creation and seeing how much, like every morning when there's a new sunrise or a sunset, you know, over here on the West Coast, when there's and it's been the last couple of months, the sunsets have just been breathtaking as he paints these, you know, beautiful pictures. Those are the times for me that I just I stand in awe of God, and I love to be in his presence.
Wonderful. Well, I like I like a number of places, but I like this one spot here in Long Beach where you it's called Signal Hill, and you go up there and you get almost a 360-degree look at everything from the out to the north. You see downtown Los Angeles, you swing around and you can see the whole valley, and then you can look around and see the ocean on the other side. And so it's a pretty magnificent view. So I like to go up there and spend time. So now I have one other thing to talk about. Cindy, you live in Florida, and it's pretty open there, isn't it?
It is. We've been eating in restaurants since May. We can have people in our sporting events. The Toronto Raptors have come here to play ball because they can't play ball in Toronto and come back and forth. I'm trying to think, our schools are in. I'm trying to think if there's anything that's closed. McDonald's has not opened inside, which puzzles me. But some of our fast food restaurants have decided to remain drive-through only. And so I don't go there because I want to sit down and eat. But in some of our Starbucks, that's kind of interesting too. But for the most part, everything is open, and our vaccines are coming hard and strong. He just today opened up all teachers, no matter what level they are and no matter how old they are eligible for the vaccine. So they're adding daily places they can get it. So it's a pretty good place to be. When I watch what's going on around us, right? So our economy has not been devastated like other places have. And so for that, I'm grateful. Our tourism is coming back, and they're looking forward to spring break. So.
Oh, spring break. There's talk about a super spreader.
Well, so they thought the Super Bowl was going to be a super spreader because they allowed, I don't know, 20-something thousand people in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the activities for the week leading up, but they've done a 4-week watch on the people that were there. And as far as they can tell, out of all of the tens of thousands of people that participated, they had 57 cases that could be pinpointed back to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
The outdoors, you know?
Now in California, I would say, Dan, what would you say that we, have you noticed any loosening up of the guidelines down there in San Diego?
The state police are at my door right now. Just they escorted me here, and they will escort me back home when we are done here.
Very nice.
Yeah, well, with the Supreme Court decision on churches, allowing people back in, that's had a minor effect on us. We still meet outside. We've got a fairly large tent that we can fit, 400 or 500 people in per service, which is great. So it really hasn't affected us much, but yeah, obviously there's several restaurants close to us that are conducting peaceful protests inside, and the numbers are dropping precipitously here as well. But, we have our health equity measurements that need to be met here in San Diego. So it has to be fair across the board, that the virus can't just go down with one certain race. It's got to go down equitably between all races before we can open up.
Really?
Isn't that nice? That's fun.
Equity just means equality. Instead of equality, equity means equality of result.
Right. It's got to be fair.
And the only way you can get equality of result is tyranny. And you need a tyrant. So we won't mention any names. Yeah,
Love the governor.
I live in Long Beach, which is in LA County, which I think is a little bit tighter than even down where you are. But having our shots now, my wife and I, that it gives us a new kind of sense of freedom, and so we're gonna exercise it.
Amen.
You could fly to Florida, Bill.
Yeah, we can. I'm gonna get on airplanes pretty soon. I'm making reservations.
Yep, you could fly to Florida, do whatever you want to do.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us and hanging in to the end, because the end is the best part, where we just talk about what's going on. And follow Jesus, and he'll teach you everything you'll ever need to know.
Well, we hope that the show wasn't too bad. Jane Hull wants everyone to know that if anything Bill said was offensive, she feels your pain. If you were upset by anything Bill and his guests said, well, mission accomplished. At the Bonhoeffer Show, we value irreverent, satirical, and generally inappropriate behavior. But when it comes to fulfilling the Great Commission, we don't mess around. Remember, subscribe. We promise. No private jets, no white suits, and definitely no toupees.